We are preparing to launch in about a week a new product called Glide Pages. Our goal with Glide Pages is basically to bring the data orientation, the high-level programming, and the ease of design to traditional form factors of desktop and laptop. Just like when you pick a Google Sheet and you're creating a Glide app, you get a default app. With Glide Pages, you get a web page. And it just took the data from our Google Sheet and it made tabs and it created a collection view. And now we just have this nice grid of our employees that's searchable. So show me everyone at Elcott Road and who is a manager. And we've got event manager, Joe Hand. And it's fully responsive. You can see it gets pretty wide. And when you go narrow, you get a mobile optimized view. And another important distinction here is there's a greater data density and there's a greater action density. So we can add more actions to a dropdown. And when I put my cursor over one of these items, I have a menu. And if I was using a card view, you can see we have these inline button actions. So that's the new sort of design product level thing that we are shipping in about a week. But what we shipped this week is our new data editor. So this is the new data editor. And what's interesting is we've added over 60 new computed columns. So here you can see at the end, we have categorized these 60 new computed columns. So for example, if we wanted to make a barcode, we're gonna add an image barcode, and let's make a barcode out of every employee salary. So these barcodes encode their salaries, 2,000, this person's gonna get a big raise. And you can see it's just recalculating these images. So there's even hyperformula and JavaScript, but there's just really interesting high-level concepts like relative time. For the relative time column, if we select as its parameter date joined company, and the format is DDMMYYYY, and we've given a format specifier. This is pretty arcane. It's gonna be pretty hard for non-technical people to do it, but at least it's possible in Glide now. So we've pulled out all of these dates, and I'll just call this company, we'll call it join to go. And we want the relative time column, and we want to give it the corrected date. So now we get how long ago each employee joined. All right, Paul.
I'm currently the researcher in residence at Glide. The initial goal that I had was to make relations easier to understand. And this kind of evolved into the more general question, like how can you do computations with your data? I have here an example of an app to manage a zoo. And here on the left, you can see the components that the page consists of and the data that's behind the page. Here I have a list of animals and I can open this up. So now I see the animal and I can look at individual animals. And if I want to do a computation with animals, I can click on this computation button. Now I get suggested computations. So I can get all the animals, I can get the number of animals, and below that I have some aggregations, the youngest age and the oldest age. And if I want to get something more specific, for example, I don't want to get all animals, I can select the suggestion, for example, on the species. And now it shows me the suggestion all animals where the animal species is chimp. So computations are represented as these statement templates. So I can swap out words to change the meaning of the statement. If I select a number, for example, like food amount, I get two statements with the aggregation over the selected column. And for example, here I have, as the example, it picked all animals where the animal name is theirs, but I can change this to food type, for example. So now I get here the total bananas that I need for my zoo, and I can add this to the page. But I could have also I could have done this also the other way around. I could have also said I want to do something with food type, and so I get all animals that eat bananas, and I can change the aggregation here to food amount. This also works like if I drill down deeper into it, so I can, for example, the animals are in a building, I can do something with the animals that are in the same building to say exactly one animal, so I get the animals that are alone in their building. So the idea is that if you want to do something more complex, where you, like in a condition, you want to use a computed value, that you can add the intermediate value selected here, and then you can drag it over here to add it as a new property and then use that property in your filter. The idea would be, like right now, it's always like that it's not this whole chunk is selected, only building is selected, and everything would be relative to building, so you could add stuff there. But I'm still thinking about how to do that, like related to the top level. But you could also like select subsections, so you could say, okay, I don't want the building of all animals, I just want the building and the animals, so that it's not this whole chunk is selected, only building is selected, and everything would be relative to building, so you could add stuff there. But I'm still thinking about how to do that.
But now we'll turn it over to Amir.
How do we make Glide easier to use for people who come in from scratch, not knowing anything? The idea that came to mind was using this thing called GPT-3. And what it does is text completion. And the idea is we give GPT-3 examples of if a user comes in with a type of app they want to build, like maybe they want to build something that manages orders for their customers, or maybe they want to build an employee directory. Can GPT-3 give a schema for what data given that app might look like? And it turns out that it can actually do pretty well. So we started with trying to build a very simple prototype. So this was the V0 of what it potentially would look like. So a user comes in, maybe they put in a prompt here. So maybe it's, I want to build an app to manage my cooking schedule. You generate the schema, and what we're doing on the back end is like the same thing that I showed you initially. We use their API, and here it spits out the schema, which there are two tables. There's a cooking and there's a list of ingredients. This infers relations. So in this cooking table, if we click on this specific column, it's inferred that there's some kind of relationship between potentially a recipe in your cooking table and a bunch of ingredients in your ingredients table. So the second question is, can it generate data for that? It gives you a bunch of different lists of ingredients. It gives you times. And the idea is that we're trying to guide a person from coming in with nothing to giving them some type of data they can play around with. And so the second question is, okay, this is a cool prototype. What would this look like in Glide? And so what we built is kind of playground where you give it in some text and we will generate the schema, we will generate the data like I showed you before. And we'll also generate an app given that data and schema of what it might look like. It has a bunch of different suggestions so that it can prime users. And let's just do the cooking schedule one. You can click values, you can interact with the data. So these are different rows in the ingredients. If we go to the cooking table, we can click on maybe one of the dates. Again, it inferred like the idea of relations came through to the app. This refers back to the cooking. And this was all, like we did all of this for you. You came in with a sentence and we made all of this to help you out. And we wanted to make it playful. We wanted to give users the idea that they can shuffle around in the app, make it their own. So they can shuffle the color of the app. They can choose something that they like. The cursor also changes color, which is really fun. It's my favorite part. They can shuffle the design. So maybe they want this like larger picture view. This is like a Tinder swipe view. You can swipe left and right. And the idea was like a user came in with just an idea, which most people do. And maybe they didn't have all the terminology and language that they needed to understand to start working with Glide, but we could give them something to start messing around with it. We could give them an idea for what relations might look like. We could give them an idea for what data and an app given a specific prompt would look like. And they could open this app directly in Glide and start messing around with it.
In Glide, we don't really have any UI for constructing a complex conditional expression right now. You can have multiple comparisons and you can and all of them, or you can or all of them, but that's as complex as it gets. So here we have a column in our table called is qualified. And there you can see there's multiple terms. And something's qualified if it's paid and the balance is 0 or less than 1,000 or over 1 million, and override is false. And Jason looked at this and he made a very good observation. He said, I don't understand the grouping of what is being anded and what is being ored. This indentation looks confusing to me. And this kind of looks like code, but it just got me thinking a little bit. I said, how would we express this if we didn't have text editors? So I made this concept I'm calling grid conditions. So it is I guess it's a Boolean algebra inside of a grid interface. So true, you start at this arrow and you go in and the cell evaluates to true. And because it's true, it draws this floor that's black and it has an opening on the right-hand side and you emerge here. Status equals paid. and it gets evaluated. And if it's true, you go right. And if it evaluates to false, you fall through the floor into the alligator lava. Okay, so here's and. If you know your truth tables and you ever took a Logic 1 course, you'll know and is only true if both things that you're anding are true. So the way and works is it creates a long hallway, it creates a sequence. Given the rules from just the single terms, both terms in sequence must be true for you to emerge at the final value. But if the second term is false, you fall into the lava. If the first term is false, you fall into the lava. And if both, the first term is false still, and you fall into the lava. Or is instead of putting these things together in sequence, it puts them together in parallel. When you or two terms, they're all true except if both of those terms are false. And because you have this sort of parallel hallway, you can always go through to this final stage over here. But if both terms are false, they both have this wall on the right-hand side and they both sort of drop you down into lava. So this is the same expression here, but in the grid condition language. And I've put in here all of the terms that are being evaluated. And they're green if they're true, if I've just chosen that they evaluate to false. And we can sort of see how this maze turns out. One thing that you can see immediately is you can put your finger on the computer screen and you can kind of just like evaluate and you see where you end up. And it's pretty alien to look at, but you could see how it would be easier to understand and to evaluate more quickly than the sort of structured text-based version. And what we didn't build is something that could take a complex expression and build one of these bigger ones. Maybe this falls apart after this sort of simplistic example, but this is on the scale of complexity that we would want to let people do in Glide, to or and a few different things. Well, thank you everyone for coming to Wine and Glide. As Paul said, we have a researcher in residence role, and Paul's residence is coming to an end. So if you think you can one-up Paul and you want to be our next research in residence, we'll have a position available soon. Or if you know anybody who is really energized and interested in the kind of projects we showed today and you think would want to take one of those and run with it or bring their own ideas, we're looking to collaborate with people who are interested in this kind of material. And and please, we'd love to see you at the next Wine and Glide. And if you have anyone else who you think would dig this stuff, please invite them as well. So thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks so much.